Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Lo-Fi History. And if this is your first time joining us, I am your host, Libba. And we have historians Marie. Hello, Marie.
Hello.
And Glenn. Hello, Glenn. And of course, this is, yes, very, very proper hello. And this is your opportunity to ask these wonderful historians your history questions. So if you want to go ahead, you can chat your history questions. And we also, as usual, we have our monthly donation goal that you can see down there, our June donation goal. We are almost halfway there, so hopefully we're at 70 out of 200. And with this donation goal, if you donate, every $5 that you donate, you could win Travels with Foxfire, stories of people, passions, and practices from Southern Appalachia. Really great book. So every $5 that you enter, or that you donate, enters you into the raffle. So of course, the more that you donate, the more chances you have to win.
Mathematically speaking.
Yes. So we do hope that you will do that as well. But we always like to start out with, what are you wearing? Now, I can see that definitely different eras still. Old, but still different eras. So, Marie, why don't we start with you? What do you represent today in your attire?
Today I'm wearing my Tudor style gown. So this is particularly, it's more of a, not wearing all of the correct things with it because, you know,
Who has the time?
This is not normal. I couldn't, honestly, I could not lace myself into it. And that is why. So I needed a maid, and we don't have one on staff.
Oh, no.
I'm working on that.
Thank you. Yeah. So I can get dressed in all of my proper attire gloriously.
Yes.
But I am representing what would be a Tudor woman, most likely a woman of noble class or higher class in the Tudor period. Usually when we say Tudor period, we refer to the time when King Henry VIII was on the throne, so roughly most of the drama in his reign did happen in the 1530s, so that's about the time period that I am wearing today. So, and I'm wearing very much inspired by Anne Boleyn, his second wife. So I have these nice, very long droopy gold sleeves. I have my pearls, and then I also have what is styled as a French hood versus the English gable style hood, which looks like you're wearing a little house on your head. But this is the French style. It's very sleek. It is round, and Anne had gone to the French court and basically grew up there, and then had come back to the English court and had brought the French style with her, and then as she gained favor in the court in England, so did the style.
All right. Well, it seems very luxurious.
Yes.
Those sleeves are so big you could keep a head in them.
I honestly could.
Oh no.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. So Glenn, do tell, what are you dressed as? What era? What can you tell us about it?
Oh, just some, say mid 18th century, with a person of middling means. Waistcoat with the longer peplums, the little things at the bottom, poofy sleeves with some frills at the collar and at the wrist. I don't have on any headgear, so I must be at home, lounging about.
Yes, otherwise you'd have a top hat. What kind of hat would you wear?
Well, at home, if I was at home, I could perhaps wear just sort of a cap, a linen cap or something like that. I might also be in a banyan, which I've ordered one.
A banyan?
Yes, I'm so excited.
I'm
going
jealous.
to be the 18th century gentleman about house.
Ooh.
I have thought about making myself one.
Now, what is a banyan? I don't know what
a banyan. Imagine, if you will, a very gaudy fabric, right? Damask or printed cottons if you were rich or something like that. And it's basically a gigantic bathrobe.
Oh.
Lots of fabric.
Lots of fabric, gigantic bathrobe, but it's meant to be worn sort of as a gentleman's around the house. You could, and
ladies can wear them too.
Ladies can wear them too. And even if you're having a quasi-formal event at your home with friends, with close friends and acquaintances, the men might be in something like that rather than the waistcoat and the tailcoat and everything with the wigs. You could, and so that's I don't have any long hairs on my head, artificial or otherwise. But that's what I'm gonna get. I can't wait to get that and just lounge about
Nice.
like an 18th century man of means.
Yes.
It's gonna be awesome.
That'd be
Yeah,
lovely.
that
That's
sounds
kind of like a Victorian tea gown,
Yeah.
which was also just a lot of fabric that you could kind of wear at home. And it's nice. It's really nice. Like, it looks pretty. You see that and you're like, that is a rich person just
Yeah.
lazing about
Yeah.
their house. But, like, you could also, it's like, I've never actually worn one, but it looks like it would be more comfy. And it's just a lot of fabric.
Yeah, and the men oftentimes, and the great thing is, a lot of the gentlemen from this time period have portraits painted at home, so they're wearing the banyans and the linen caps, and a lot of them, I would say over half, don't even have waistcoats on under them. It's just the shirt, it's the cravat sort of loosely tied around. They're just sort of
okay.
or
I
reading a
see.
book,
I'm gonna pull
or
this
painting
picture
an apple
up.
or something like that. Yes.
Yeah,
Painting
in
an
fact,
apple.
here's one of
Well,
the
not
portraits.
painted a picture of an apple that he's holding.
Oh, okay.
Not actually painting the apple.
All right. So
Yeah, pull up
as-
a picture of a man
yeah.
and a banyan.
So this is this what
Yes,
you're
that's
describing?
exactly what I'm
Alright,
talking about.
Nice. That is pretty fancy. Yeah, that looks comfy. I
And,
would-
and it looks, and they're not even really trying to be. I'm not sure if they're going for an exotic look or
Right.
that's literally 18th century laid back and lazy.
I mean,
'cause-
yeah.
Athleisure in
At
the
least-
18th century, if
Yes,
you will.
Yes.
most working men did not have the wherewithal to have that kind of outfit. First, they didn't get to laze around to the
I was
house.
like, when
right.
did they have time?
Yeah, exactly.
Just sit about their
Exactly.
house.
Right.
So, yes.
Well, very nice, very nice. And I see we have Fried. Hello, Fried, our
Hey!
friend from Germany. How are we doing? We're doing pretty well today. It's been a great day. We had an awesome first day of our virtual summer camp.
Woo!
Yes.
Virtual camp.
If you check out our Facebook or our Instagram, I posted a really great picture of one of our
Yes.
students, longtime
right.
student Ben, who is just a great kid. And he dressed up as Benjamin Franklin today because they got to meet Benjamin Franklin today. And it's a really good picture. You should check it out.
Yes.
So cute.
So,
It
yes,
makes
it's
my
been a
heart
great
so
day.
happy.
Yes. And today, during the virtual camp, y'all made handkerchief dolls,
We
right?
did. We made handkerchief dolls. We did a worksheet about sequence of events in the
Yeah.
American Revolution, basically 1770 to 1778. And then we also read some of our story, George versus
And
George.
That's right. Yeah. So King George versus George
George
Washington.
Washington.
Yes.
Talking about how there are two sides to every story.
Indeed. Indeed.
And I bet they both told them we're in a banyan.
Perhaps. Perhaps they did. All right. So we've also got Elizabeth here. Hello, Elizabeth. And of course,
Hey!
hello to all of our regulars. Do feel free to say hello in the chat.
Yeah.
And of course, feel free to chat your questions. We already have one question today from Thomas. Hello, Thomas.
Hello.
And Thomas wants to know, can you tell us anything interesting about dogs going into battles with soldiers? Thank you. All right. That's a very
Yes.
great topic.
There's a lot.
It's so cool. So, dogs, we are among the first domesticated animals in history that we know about. Like before horses and pigs and chickens and cows, it was dogs. So that means that they're going to play a role domestically. That means they're going to play a role militarily as well. And, guarding camps, dogs have heightened senses, right? They can hear better, they can see better, they can very often smell better. Like, I'll come to that in a second.
Okay.
So they're going to be trained to sort of guard camps and things, and then they're going to be trained to sort of attack certain targets, right? This could be done for sport. There was bear baiting in Elizabethan or Tudor England, actually going all the way back to the medieval period. But dogs of war are something that has been around. They're in Shakespeare. There are, from the Renaissance, there are actually little miniature doggy suits of armor that exist. Yeah, you can look that up. Look up dog armor.
There's
Okay.
also cat armor.
What?
Yeah, but the cats, that was just for show.
That was just for show?
but it makes me. It's so.
I want
cute.
to see them try and get the cat in the armor.
I would also
Yeah,
like to
right.
as well, because that would be a battle.
Maybe they shaped it like a cardboard box. Anyway,
That's pretty clever.
that's the only way to do it, I think.
Yes.
But when you get into and dogs have always followed soldiers around when they're on march, on campaign, and camp. They're just fun to be around. But in the 20th century, dogs, because people developed more advanced ways to train them to do certain things, dogs could be very much a part of the military in some fantastic ways and some sad ways, right? So the dogs were used by American forces in the Pacific to sort of sniff out the hidden Japanese bunkers and entrenchments and things like that, to see if they were going to be alive in there. Probably the saddest is that the Soviets during World War II trained dogs to be anti-tank dogs, and what they would do is they would to train the dogs, they would take them out to dog training areas, and they would have a tank out there, and they would put dog treats under the tanks. So the dog would be trained to go under the tank. Well, what they did was in battle is they would take the dog, they would strap an explosive pack to its back with a switch, and then they would let the dog go, and the dog would run and go under the tank, and the switch would trip, and it would theoretically blow the tank up.
Thank you for your sacrifice, dog.
So, but there are I know that they have these in Europe, but I also know that there are several monuments in the continental United States, one in I think there's one on Guam. I know there's one in Hawaii, to our canine friends in the military service, and they still train dogs even today.
There are
And
police
I do
dogs and military dogs,
I do
service
have
dogs.
some photos. Is this what we're looking for?
Yes.
So we have an illustration or a painting of some sort with dog armor, and then the actual dog armor.
And, you know, I don't know that they would actually take the dog and put it into battle with the armor on.
Yeah.
By the time you get to the period where the armor style that's on the right of the screen there is going to be in effect, you're looking at the era of ostentatious display and dukes and princes saying, I'm so rich, I can have this kind of gold-plated armor made
my
for my
dog.
dog. And, you know, peasants are starving, but they're peasants. Who cares? My
Aw.
dog has armor.
Wah, wah, wah.
So, yes, that's an excellent question. And
That
there
is an
are
excellent
several
question.
books on the subject.
Now, what
And
about
those
later? And I mean, like, did you? Sorry, I was looking for dog stuff, so I don't know if you addressed like later wars, like World War II or one.
Oh, yeah,
or
well,
any-
that's where the suicide tank doggies in
yes.
World War II, the Soviets.
Okay.
the-
World War I also had dogs. They had little gas masks for the doggies in
Oh my
trenches.
goodness.
Right.
Wow. Well, excellent
Also
question.
parachuting dogs.
Parachuting dogs.
Yes.
Yes. Oh,
There's a whole children's story about the parachuting
I
dogs.
wanna
of
say-
World War II.
there was also a couple of dogs have literally been awarded meritorious service medals, or medals for their service, and you can see, especially in the modern era, the World War II and up era, there are pictures of these dogs being awarded Purple Hearts or things like that because they would save people's lives
Wow,
with the
yeah.
things that they did, right? So
Very
Get hurt
cool.
in the
and get hurt in the
process.
process.
That sounds like a great live stream topic as
It
well.
does.
So thank you, Thomas, and thank you, Elizabeth. that was excellent. Freed says, first time in a while, I have a question. Can we talk about the history of exercise? Did people other than soldiers exercise in different eras? That is an excellent question.
That
Yes.
is a good question. I don't know the answer to that definitively. I know that I can say that widespread exercise has really only come about in recent days, in recent years of our very modern sedentary lifestyles.
This is an interesting thing to trace through fashion, especially with our modern athleisure fashion.
Yeah.
So exercise clothes did not come into existence really until the mid 1800s, and that's when you start to have basically like a calisthenics. And then as we move, that's about mid 1800s E. And also you have a war in the middle of that in America. So like that kind of disrupts exercise. You're just trying to survive at that point. Into the later 1800s, you start to have this thing called the bicycle. And exercising / traveling via bicycle, you have bicycling outfits because you need specific outfits for bicycling, especially for ladies because otherwise your skirt's going to get caught and like
on the velocipedes especially.
Yes, and you also have to like sit with your one foot on one side, one foot on the other side, so that requires a special outfit for ladies, and then also gentlemen would also have cycling outfits or hunting outfits as a form of exercise. Going out on hikes and walks became more of a Victorian thing, to go out and stroll and to have the creation of parks that you could then go and exercise in, to go and take the air in, because this is at the point when we start to get things like cars, where because you used to be traveling, you're walking or you're riding a horse, which I would count that both as exercise.
Well, it's activity.
Activity, at least.
Yes.
I mean, they would not count it as exercise.
Right.
I would personally count it as exercise.
Right.
Well,
modern human.
We live in the
if we get
21st century.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they would not count it as exercise. That is just exertion.
That's just going about.
Going about. But as you get like the car where you're just sitting to go somewhere and it's not really taking effort besides pushing a pedal and steering a wheel,
right,
you start to have people wanting to get out and exercise
their bodies,
their bodies. That's when because swimming really comes about as an exercise form versus a just go and splash about in the ocean form.
Right.
And around the 1920s, and also even on the gym, the Titanic actually had a gym
for the first class passengers. Who are becoming more and more sedentary,
yes,
unlike those working people in the second and especially, third class.
Yes. And they had a horse riding machine that you could sit on, and they also had a rowing machine, which I think is really funny on a boat.
Yeah, right.
Weights.
Not enough people practice that one.
Little did they know that their life depended on it.
Yes.
But yes, so it starts to, I would say, around the, without being a scholar necessarily on the subject, I would say exercise as we know it.
Yeah, the purpose of moving your body specifically to tone the body without any actual practical application like swimming or fencing or anything like that for military purposes, that's a very recent addendum to, and I think it like you say, you can trace it in fashion, you can trace it in labor saving devices, you can trace it through the jobs that are available to people, right? The democratization of easy work becomes so much more common that we have to replace the work that our bodies are genetically coded to carry out. Thus is born exercise, which sometimes seems like an awful waste of time, and yet here we are. I mean, you know what I mean. It seems like the people who lived in the past would be abhorrently hilarified at us that we work 8 hours plus a day, and then we go somewhere to get on a machine that then we run nowhere for an hour.
I think they would also be appalled by the idea of running nowhere for an hour.
Yes.
Right, yes.
Or even running somewhere.
For an hour.
Right? People thought...
For no purpose, other than enjoyment.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would not run that far just for enjoyment unless something was chasing me.
That was usually the historic case. But no, that's an excellent question. We could probably do more research on that. You could probably do more research on that.
Yeah, that's a great topic.
Exercise as we know it is a very recent phenomenon.
Yeah, and thank you, Freed, and hello to Fan Brave on Twitch. I don't recognize your username, so if this is your first time here, feel free to drop us a question. This is Glenn Marie, and I am Libba. And Olivia, yes, I did realize we did have a little interruption in our internet connection. Looks like we are back on Facebook and Twitch. Unfortunately, I think YouTube has stopped and there's just no way to reconnect. So we will upload the recording to YouTube, so all of our YouTube friends can check that out. All right. So, and hello, Olivia. Good to see you.
Yeah.
one of our favorite regulars. And Olivia has a question for us today. Olivia says, I just finished a World War I book about code breakers in London in the secretive Room 40. Did things like that actually happen? And maybe we can just back up a little bit and talk about what is code breaking, especially during World War I specifically. So what does that mean to be a code breaker?
People have been trying to communicate with each other so that other people cannot understand it for quite some time, right? Whether it is merely doing, transmitting information via another language that other people may not know, or having a secret list of code words. Pre-electronic, pre-modern era spies would use, the invisible ink and things like that, and code wheels and things like that. But I think the thing with the Room 40, which gets much, much bigger in World War II, right, as what I'm about to say goes on, the advent of electronic communication opens up an entirely new world of espionage, counter-espionage, and things like that, because with machines, you're able to create codes that perhaps humans can't necessarily translate. You have to have another machine to do it. And so intercepting these signals, because here's the thing, you can't stop the signal, right? If you have a radio tower and you begin transmitting orders to your armies, when it goes out, it's not like it can only go one direction or only go somewhere else. It goes everywhere. So the enemy is going to be able to hear or receive whatever transmission you send out. So you had better make it something that only the people you want to understand it can understand it. Whether that's with code books, whether that's with a machine that can encrypt it and then decrypt it on the other end, this starts to become the situation. And I want to say that if I'm remembering correctly, Olivia, Room 40 is the one that had decoded especially the German naval situation. So they could intercept the signals. They had codes. They were able to break some of the codes, and they knew what the German Navy was going to do, like almost before it left port. They knew where it was going and how many ships were going. And so the problem was, when you have the information, you can't always use it, because then you compromise the asset, as the spies say. If Lib is sending secret codes that she doesn't think I'm reading, but I'm reading every one, and then I start acting on every secret code she sends, she's going to figure out that I've broken her code.
Right.
And then she'll either stop using it and go to a new code, or send false information knowing that I'm going to pick it up. So the Germans they didn't totally figure it out, but they started to realize somebody has figured out a lot of our code. So a lot of things, when the Navy would sell out, they would do it without sending any radio transmissions whatsoever. They reverted back to old written orders. Or, as you do on ships, you can use the lights and use Morse code, right? Or signal flags. Right. They were still using signal flags in World War I to prevent the enemy from reading their information, their messages, which at the Battle of Jutland led to a major issue, because the British fleet had intercepted a message saying the entire German fleet is coming out. But then, out of paranoia, the British fleet decides to send messages to its ships with flags, the exact same way they had done in the Napoleonic Wars.
Wow.
The ships are tens of miles apart. It's a cloudy North Atlantic day. There's battle smoke and everywhere once the guns start firing. Flags are not the way to do it.
Right.
So breaking those codes and how they can affect the war, that's just one example of how they can begin to affect the war. And moving on into World War II, and oh my goodness, to the present day, electronic warfare has become the key to gathering intelligence or preventing your enemies from getting intelligence about you.
Yes, and Freed mentioned the story of the Enigma machine.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, can you tell us what was that?
So, in World War II, the Germans had created an unbreakable coding system using a series, and it's not computer. Let me back up. It is a computer, but it's not digital. It's analog mechanical electronics, right? Yeah. And so it's a series of numbers and letters. And so what you would do, you had to have an Enigma machine at each end. And you had your Enigma machine, and you would set the 6, I think, rotors to, 136A24. And then you would write out your message, attack the Allies on Island X. And you would start typing that message in. And when you typed in ATT, you would type A, and then it would send an electric signal through every single rotor, and the rotors could rotate based on what all the settings were. And there were literally hundreds of millions of possible combinations, because every time you pushed in one letter, everything reset based on what the original letters were. So it was theoretically unbreakable. Well, the problem is it's a computer. And so at Bletchley Park in England, the Brits were able to develop their own computer that was the size of a room.
Right.
That was eventually able to decode Enigma. But the thing you have to remember is they had also captured a couple of Enigma machines. One was severely damaged, but they got enough information from these machines to, in effect, reverse engineer it. So they didn't break Enigma out of the blue. They still had to have one of the machines to kind of figure out what to do. And this was the absolute most top secret thing for British intelligence during the entire war, because eventually they could read most of German military traffic. And again, you can't necessarily act on it, because if you act on it, the Germans are going to know and they're going to change it. And you've just spent 3 years and millions of dollars figuring out the code, and all they have to do is change it, and that's for nothing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And they also had to, one of the hard things about breaking the Enigma code was because they could reset it to different letters and different things. So before they had cracked it, before they had figured it out, when they were just trying to figure it out themselves, before they had cracked it and everything, you had to do it fast, because otherwise they would change.
And it could take days, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So some of them, they were like, okay, well, we cracked part of it, but then it changes all over again, and then all over again, and all over again. And there's actually a movie about this that came out several years ago.
Yes. With Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yes. And I thought that I saw that one, and I thought it was very good.
It's pretty accurate too.
Yes.
It's pretty
And
accurate.
I think one of the things that helped them, according to the movie, so I'm fuzzy on this, and
Sure.
you can tell me if it's historically accurate or not in the movie, is that one of the things that also helped them break the Enigma machine code, was that they ended or began every message with Heil Hitler.
They ended it.
They ended
Yes.
every message with Heil Hitler. So they were, if they could figure out, they once they figured that part out, they could kind of back figure it.
Well, and at least use it to check their work,
Yes.
right? Because if you got a message and you put it through the machine and it didn't end with Heil Hitler, something was off.
Yeah.
And you kind of had to go back and fix it. But yeah, again, you can read everything, but you can't act on it. So, for example, there was one point where they knew where this is how they killed Rommel, right? The greatest German general. They found out he would be traveling along this road at this time of day because of an Enigma message. Well, they can't send 1,000 planes to take him out, because then they'll know something was up. So they only sent 2 planes to patrol that road, because if it's just 2 planes attacking German traffic, well, that's a coincidence, right? And so the 2 attack planes got fortunate enough to see this staff car moving along the road, strafe it, and that was the end of Rommel.
Wow.
Well, that's actually not true. That was not the end of Rommel. He was injured severely, had to go home to recuperate, and then when he was at home, it was discovered that he was part of the Operation Valkyrie to bring Hitler down, or at least was implicated, and had to commit suicide to maintain his status and his family's safety.
Wow.
It's all complicated.
Yeah. As often is the case.
Yes, as often is the case. But that coincidental attack on Rommel basically took him out of the war at that point.
Wow. Well, another fascinating topic. Thank you both to Olivia and Freed for those questions and comments. Olivia does have another question for us. And of course, anyone who's just joining us, do feel free to chat your history questions for Glenn and Marie to answer today live. Olivia says, so today was my last day of school. Woohoo!
Yay!
Happy summer!
Yay!
But I know that it's different in places with, so schools having a different schedule. Why is this? So to sort of reform your question, Olivia, I'm also kind of curious, how was the school year determined? What factors, when public education became a thing, decided, all right, this is when you're going to school and this is when you get a break?
A big part of it was the agricultural season,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, the not that people were opposed to a public education. Well, generally speaking, they were not opposed to a public education, but we're talking about early America in the time when it was planting season or harvest season. Everyone had to go in and pull their weight, literally, to make the harvest as successful as possible. So that was part of it. Now, public school has also burgeoned as time has gone by, as to how much time it takes up. So traditionally, summer was off because that was the busiest season, agriculturally speaking. And I think Lib and I, we were talking about this the other day. Even back in our day, so long ago, summer break was easily 3 months.
Right.
Was it that way even back in your day?
No.
No. Okay.
No.
At least 3 months. I mean, it was all of June, all of July, and a huge chunk of August. Right. And some of May. And as time has gone by, now I notice with my kids, it's barely 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's barely just 2 months. Because people are trying to. The agricultural excuse is gone. Right.
Right.
Some places have experimented, and I haven't followed up how this went, with year-round school. Not 5 days a week, every week, forever. But instead of having one long summer break, they'll have 3 weeks here, 3 weeks here, 3 weeks here, 3 weeks here. Sort of the breaks are also distributed throughout the year. And I don't know, folks who have, if you're watching and you've taken part in a school system like that, I would love to hear your take on it.
Yeah, I'd be curious. Yeah.
But that's the gist of it. That's why that has come that way. And as we've moved further away from an agricultural economy and an agricultural society to a more professional's not quite the right word, industrialized,
Right.
service-oriented society, most jobs have required more, theoretically. There's a lot of debate that can happen here. Theoretically require more preparation, and so school has stretched on out to provide that preparation for entering a modern workplace. But that also has a lot to do with it.
Olivia
Don't get rid of
says-
that history curriculum, though, people.
That's right.
Well-rounded educations are the most important.
Olivia says that my school year is September to mid-June, with winter and Easter break being about a week. So, yeah, September to mid-June. That's a little different than.
I bet that's because she's way up there in New York, and their winters are all crazy.
maybe,
For a Georgian, they're all crazy.
Right. Yeah.
Also, it's interesting because as you get lower, like in the United States, so we're down here in Georgia, we're almost as south as you get, and besides Florida and Hawaii.
No one counts Florida.
But so we are for high schools and elementary schools, public schools, usually summer starts at the end of May, like
the last week of
like
May.
last week of
Yeah.
May. Like you still have a little bit of May and break, but I've noticed as you go up into New York and Oregon and higher up, school goes farther into June and then longer into September, and I think that also has to do with climate.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense.
When does it actually start to get warm where you are?
Right.
Right. Because Olivia had sent me an email question. She said, "I have this thing for school," and I'm like, "What?"
Like school's still
It's
happening?
like June. What's the matter with y'all? And then she talked to me, and I thought about it for more than a half second. I'm like, oh, I guess that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
And Fried over in Germany says that their summer break over here is 6 weeks. So a little different there as well. 6 weeks.
It's always fun. And maybe we can do a live stream on this, not necessarily Georgia history or American history even, but just a comparison of different countries' broadly speaking, right, the way their schools work.
Right.
Because
yeah.
everyone goes to school where they go to school, and that becomes how we think of it. And Americans were totally blown away when they were introduced to the British school system through that phenomenal documentary, the Harry Potter series.
Ah, yes.
Right? And even though it's wizarding school, you know, there were finals and the way the school system works and headmasters and things like that.
Right.
Very different from the American system.
Definitely.
I had a headmaster at my school.
Oh, yeah. So I guess
We just had
different
a principal who
Yeah.
threatened to beat us if we did not obey.
No.
We had a principal too, but he didn't do that.
Okay.
Well, good.
He smiled when he said it, but I'm pretty sure he meant it. But I'm sure the German pre-college educational system is also very different
Right.
from what's in the States. I'm
And
sure the French
Russian
system.
and-
Yeah.
Yeah. I see that Carol must have experience with year-round school. She says it's great, so
Alright.
I can see that.
Okay,
Pretty good.
we have to ask Carol, is that, you say it's great, is that as a student, as a parent, or perhaps both?
Yeah, you're a
I would be-
teacher.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or a teacher, for that matter.
And Freed asks, "What's the difference between a headmaster and a principal?" I don't know. I mean, probably not too much, right? I mean, it's mostly. I feel like headmaster comes with boarding schools and private schools typically.
Yes. So at my school, since I had one, basically we had principals who were in charge of the elementary school and the high school, and the headmaster is over all of it.
Oh,
Because
okay.
it was a private school, so they're all together.
Right.
So the headmaster is like
The school
like
person.
the
yeah.
school person, like in charge of both schools, all the schools, and versus like the principals
That
who then were
makes
under the
sense.
headmaster, and then you had like the board was up there with like
You know that- yeah, that
headmaster and
makes
stuff,
sense.
too, but
Because in the public school system, usually there's elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools, and they're all at different campuses.
mhm.
Now they're all at different campuses, so each one has a principal, and usually all the schools answer to a central city or county school superintendent.
Yeah, so our
There's
headmaster
no
is
there's no
basically your
intermediary
superintendent.
between the school and the person in charge for the entire system.
Yeah.
That sounds like that might work a little better.
And Olivia, speaking of the weather, says this winter wasn't that bad. We didn't get more than a foot. Like,
Wow.
We didn't
That's-
get more than a half inch.
right, yeah.
No, we got like a dusting,
Yeah.
kind of,
Yes.
at one point.
Oh, and I
It's so-
see. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it's just so sad because it seems like the last several years we've gotten one barely decent snow, and that's been it.
Right, yeah.
I have a theory. Every 4 years we get a snow that shuts us down.
Yeah, right. Every 4 years.
What
Yeah.
do we do?
Very soon.
I want one.
Yeah, I know, right?
Very soon.
Oh, Alma is here. Hello, Alma
Hello.
and Gabby, I do
Hey.
believe. And Alma says year-round school is great as parent and student. When you are tired of being at school, you get a break. When you're bored, you go back to school. So
All right.
I could see that. And
Yeah.
Carol, same similar reason. Good for student growth, and teachers need the summer break. I can understand that. Yeah, especially with the size of classrooms in public schools these days. So definitely, yeah. Just the history of public education has fascinated me as well. I recently did some research for a living history gig about the Lucy Cobb Institute in Athens, Georgia, which there's a funny story about how that was founded. There was a professor of mathematics at the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia, and his wife was very much a proponent of education for boys and girls, and she wrote an anonymous letter to the editor of the Southern Banner in Athens calling for an educational institution that rivaled the reputation of the University of Georgia, because there were finishing schools for girls, but they weren't at the same caliber or the same goal, in mind for like an academic experience. So she wrote this anonymous letter, and then a man named T.R.R. Cobb, hence the Lucy Cobb Institute, reads this and is convinced that he wants to start a school and name it after his daughter, and it turns out that the anonymous writer was actually his sister.
Oh, it's an inside job.
Yeah, it's an inside job, right? But that's how the Lucy Cobb got started, and that's a pretty renowned school for its day.
So that wasn't just a finishing school. That was an actual
Yeah,
No, they awarded degrees.
academics and
Oh yes,
more
yes,
more traditional academic
they kind of,
pursuits.
yeah, exactly. They kind of had to balance it in a way to attract the elite young ladies and still have that, still teaching very much, traditional roles of women, but at the same time, they had lectures on Shakespeare from a famous professor coming in, and philosophy.
Well,
and
you certainly don't want your wife being too brainy.
Yeah, right.
Back in the 1800s.
Yeah, well, the thing is that the woman who started this, her daughter ends up being the director at the Lucy Cobb. She ends up founding the Tallulah Falls School, which is a very famous school here that started out as a school for mountain children in Northeast Georgia, and now it has quite a very good reputation. International students come to it now. So just the story of education in the New South after the Civil War is a fascinating topic that I got to dive into a little bit.
Because public education didn't exactly exist here.
It was almost, antebellum, for many, it was almost considered beneath them.
Not for universities.
Well,
but
no,
for,
right.
But for public
education.
What we think of as primary and high school, a gentleman doesn't need such things as mathematics and rhetoric and things like that. He knows how to run his business without any of that. And you sure didn't want the poor white crackers getting educated, because they might start to figure things out. You certainly didn't want your enslaved African Americans getting a public education, because they really might start figuring something out. And so public school system antebellum in the South was pretty atrocious.
Yeah.
You get to the post-Civil War, when the Freedmen's Bureau comes south, and schools open up for the first time for the previously enslaved African Americans, and they have 99% enrollment rates, right? Because these people have been denied any kind of education, and now they're being given an education, and they flock to it. And only at that point do a lot of white Southerners go, maybe we should get one too then.
Yeah.
And so at that point, public schools start to burgeon in the South.
Yeah.
Before that, it was not too great.
Right.
For
Didn't
anyone.
really exist.
Yeah.
When you look at even the old one-room schoolhouses, try to find one pre-1860, and they just don't exist for the most part. Some of that is because they just haven't survived, but a lot of that is because there weren't many to begin with.
Yeah, and population density plays a role in that.
And if you were going to be educated, you were just going to be educated at home by your parents.
Right.
Yeah,
Now, formal education, we've made this point before, right? We're talking to formal education.
Yes.
People still got an education for what they needed to do. If you're going up a farmer's son, you're going to get an excellent education on how to prepare the land, harvest crops,
really.
Or apprenticeship. Yeah, even an informal one at home, you're going to get an education, just not a reading, writing, arithmetic formal education.
And Alma, I see your question for Gabby, but while Fried says on Twitch, while we're on the topic of schooling, have you guys ever heard about the history of German fraternities? It's a super interesting topic about democracy, nationalism, the good kind, liberalism, fencing, and eventually nationalism again, but this time the bad kind.
Aren't these the ones where they have the Schlagerduels and they only wear goggles, so the point is to get a big scar? Is that those, Fried?
Oh my goodness.
Because if that is, I've always wanted to do one.
Oh, he said yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That does sound fascinating, though. If you want to throw some resources in our direction, we'll be glad to read some. Fried says, I used to be in one for a year.
Did you get your scar?
Yeah, did you get your famed scar? Now, going back to Gabby's question. So, Gabby is our musical theater enthusiast. And she watched Annie recently, and she wants to know about the Great Depression. So, did people really put their kids in orphanages because they couldn't afford them during the Great Depression? So, what do we know about what the circumstances of why someone would need to give their child to an orphanage?
For in the Great Depression or just in
I guess
general?
I mean, if you have other information to share, just in general, but Gabby's question was specifically the Great Depression. But if you know about earlier times, that's good
Well,
too.
usually, just even up into today, is if a person does not have the means to support a child, or they don't have the capacity to take care of the child, then the child will either go live with relatives. But if your relatives also do not have the means to support them, or they didn't know that you had the child to begin with, speaking of earlier time periods, then you had an orphanage was really your only option for the most part. Orphanages, the history of taking care of children who could not be taken care of by their birth families is a very interesting historical topic, because orphanages in the United States really did not exist until Eliza Hamilton actually opened the first orphanage in New York City. And of course, then there are like public orphanages and private orphanages. But then for a very long time before that, before you have this idea of an orphanage, you would have the convent, where you would take the child to the convent, and then the nuns would raise it. And basically the convent was like another form of an orphanage, because they're there to help take care of the poor and impoverished, and to make sure that they survive, which includes the children of those people. So in the 1930s, I'm sure we could document people are incredibly impoverished, trying to get food, trying to get work, trying to just survive. You also have the Dust Bowl going on in the 1930s, so agricultural families are having, in the Midwest especially, are having a terrible time, and then they go to the cities and they try to find work, but no one's getting work because the economy has come to almost a screeching halt, and people are getting laid off left and right. So, of course, this is a time where it is going to be very hard to take care of a child. It's going to be very hard to just get food on your table in general. People are trying to just scrape together bits and pieces of food here and there. And everyone's really in that situation. So, sending your kid to go live with a family member, which... if you read any of Jane Austen, like half of Jane Austen is like sending, your poor relations to the rich relations for them to take care of them. Yeah. Because there's not, that would be preferable to sending your child to an orphanage or to a convent or to somewhere else where you don't know the person. But in the Great Depression especially, everyone's kind of in the same boat of the economy really, really stinks. And no one's having that great of a time. Economically. So one of the choices would be to, if you could not, feed your child, but you wanted to guarantee that your child would have, a meal to survive, sending them to an orphanage, I guess, would be an option. Was that a very common practice? I do not believe so. No, by no means. Am I sure it happened once or twice? Yes, because... it happens.
When is Annie set?
It's set in the Great Depression.
But I mean, like, what year?
Oh, in the Great Depression?
Let me see. Let me check real quick.
And how old is Annie?
Because Annie's kind of older. So
I'm wondering if Annie wasn't abandoned at the height of the boom in the 20s then. I've just punched a hole in the entire Annie plot.
Well,
unless
the comic strip premiered in the 1920s, but let's see when it's actually... supposed to
they knew about the Depression in the 1920s?
They knew that it wasn't going to happen.
Oh, 1933? Okay.
Yep.
But it debuted in the 20s.
Well, the comic strip that inspires the musical...
I guess it didn't really take off until the Depression and things were tough all over.
Yeah. Where they're like, we all identify with Little Orphan Annie now.
Yeah, exactly. It was an identification crisis.
Yes.
But yeah, the actual
sense.
musical Annie was
set
in
1970.
The musical happened in the 70s. It was set in 1933. Yeah.
Okay, so that is pretty bad in the Great Depression.
Right.
Yeah.
That's pretty bad.
That's like the depths.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Josh has just joined us. Hello.
But I would not say that that's a common experience.
Right.
For people, there are not lots of letters and things that it probably happened once. There's an exception to every single rule.
Certainly.
It's plausible.
Right.
plausible, but not necessarily a common practice. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a really hard time. So if you can't take care of your kid, you try to find someone who can.
Yeah. And Josh, Josh says, "Hi, sorry I'm late. Josh, we have time for one of your what ifs if you got one." So
Put you on the spot.
Yeah, but of course, no pressure. And Alma said that Annie is 12 years old.
12.
And going back to fencing and Freed, he has scars, but he's not a Scarface. So.
Better luck next time. I always wanted. Here's how stupid I am. I always thought that if I was going to get a scar, I wanted to like start up here and then like run right through there and then go all the way down.
Classic. But then you like have to be a villain. I mean, it's just kind of a
maybe I'm a
requirement,
misunderstood villain.
Misunderstood villain.
Villains are on a comeback. All the movies now are trying to humanize the villains,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Joker
right.
and
That's
Cruella
Maleficent.
and
Yeah.
Maleficent. Yeah, it's
So
good guys are bad guys. Bad guys are good guys. The
Yeah.
world's gone topsy-turvy.
Topsy-turvy. Josh asks, why do you think Cyrus the Great was kind to the people he conquered? I have no idea who that is, so I will need some context.
Because that is the best economic sense.
All right, give us what's
Okay,
going on. Who's
so-
Cyrus?
Cyrus was of the Medes and came to be king of the Persian Empire, the ancient Persian Empire in, the 500s, maybe late 600s BC. Cyrus the Great sort of put the Persian Empire together. And he did it as he conquered different areas. He would conquer what's now Anatolia, Egypt, all the way to into India, close to the Indus River. And what he would do is he would conquer the peoples, but then he would say, okay, this is good colonial policy. This is a model that people have followed. Keep your religion. Acknowledge our religion, but you can keep yours. You can keep whatever little local form of government you want, but one of my governors is going in here, and he's going to be in charge, and pay your taxes. If you do what the governor says, if you pay your taxes, and if you don't revolt, everything is good, and there will be no problems between us. That is why Cyrus turned. I mean, so it wasn't that he was just being nice. It's just good practical policy, right? That's how he was able to put the empire together, which was not easy. But the more difficult part was to keep it together. And the Persian Empire gets so big so fast because of Cyrus. Of course, Cyrus is a Latinization of the Greek Kairos, which is a Greek version of them trying to translate what we think is probably Korash. The Persian Korash into the Greek Kairos, into the Latin Cyrus, because the Greeks never really quite got the Persian language, and they changed all the names, right?
I see.
Like later on, his grandson Darius was probably Dorayavosh,
Oh, that sounds
which
fun.
the Greeks then took into Darius, and then the Latins made it Darius.
Oh, well. And now he's known as Daryl.
And there he's known practically he's known as Daryl. So yeah. And I think one other thing I'll say about Cyrus, he wasn't just being nice, he was being smart, but you had to have that core of hardened military Persians. And when he had put this kingdom together, they said, why don't we build our capital city down in the soft place? Because he had come originally from this mountainous and sort of quasi-arid region where his armies had come from. They said, well, now that we've made it, let's put our capital city down in between the Tigris and Euphrates. There's a plain. It's very beautiful. There's plenty of food. And he's like, no, we're not going to do that, because you can have a soft capital that will breed soft men, or you can have a hard capital that will breed hard men, and we're going to need hard men to keep this empire together. So he kept his capital way up, in the mountains and in the hills.
Wow.
And later on built a capital, which is also in a quasi-arid region in a place called Susa. but then we get into the Greek and Persian wars, which lead to the Peloponnesian wars, and I bet we're almost out of time.
We are.
Yeah.
Oh!
But a fun one to end on. Thank you, Josh. I'm sorry. We're going to, of course, you can always catch up on the stream. And for anyone who wants to watch it on YouTube, I will upload this recording to YouTube.
Right. Thanks, Josh.
Yes. And before we head out for the day, tomorrow we have a rerun of 20th Century Military Women with Glenn. So catch this tomorrow on Facebook and YouTube at 2 p.m. Eastern, our usual time. And you can learn how the roles of women have changed and developed through the 20th century. So that's going to be really, really fun and interesting. And of course, we also have our raffle. Woo! So if you donate toward our monthly donation goal, you may win Travels with Foxfire, which is a really fascinating book. I've gotten to at least flip through it. I'm excited to read it, but it's the stories of people, passion, and practices from Southern Appalachia. Really fascinating topic, and every $5 you donate will enter you into the raffle, and we will announce that on July 1st. Oh, thank you guys. Everybody's saying thank you. And and Gabby's preparing us for next week. She said that she's gonna find a Tuck Everlasting question. I love that book, Gabby, so I'm very excited about that. All right, everybody, thank you so much, and great questions today. We will see you not next Tuesday, but the next. So we will see you back for Lo-Fi on the 29th. Oh, but I did also want to mention that next Tuesday I will be hosting a special presentation for Pride Month about LGBTQ social and civil rights movements through the United States. So I'm really excited to present that to you guys. So that's going to be Tuesday at 4 p.m. So do make sure that you respond to our Facebook invite so you don't forget. So I look forward to seeing y'all in the chat, hopefully tomorrow and maybe Friday for a members live stream, and then Tuesday for the for mine.
And then the next Tuesday for the next Lo-Fi History.
Exactly. Yeah. All right, everybody. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.